Welcome back, folks, to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. And as usual, we have a lot to cover. And I want to talk about how some radical Democrats are running as pretend Christians and twisting Scripture. Then I want to address the Democrats' attempt to destroy the electoral system. Then we will talk about corruption in amoral capitalists. And then I will give you a quick history on the wickedness of the Democrat Party from its beginnings up to today. They haven't really changed much, folks. And then I will deal with the latest headlines to tell you about breaking news about Maine's Plattner and how the virus of communist Mayor Mondami is spreading. Imagine that. So let's get started. Today I want to attempt to show you the thread of evil and wickedness that runs through our society and how close we are to failing as a republic and a free people. To start with, let's talk about the group that should know better and do better. Many Christians, or maybe I should say many so-called Christians, that is, who think they are Christians, but who have been falsely assured and blinded by their own sin, which takes on many forms, like voting and supporting what is wicked and who is evil. Why is this happening? Well, it's a combination of things. Too many Christians are not able to recognize evil. They worship a sissified Jesus, as Dr. Bauckham once preached. Others refuse to confront evil or even take part and be an influence in the world. They think it beneath them. They act like the monks in the first century when they walled themselves off from society, thinking themselves holier and more spiritual by doing so. Another is the indolence or laziness, sometimes called slothfulness in the Scripture. Another is selective ignorance or stupidity, wrongly assuming that not knowing will be a defense on Judgment Day. That, too, the Bible is clear on. No one is with excuse on Judgment Day, folks. Christians with their gross misunderstandings of Scripture, false teachers in the pulpit, and at best, those who are not qualified to be in the pulpit will deliver themselves into the hands of their enemies every time, thinking themselves righteous in doing so. Let me remind you that martyrdom is not an elective, nor does it make you more spiritual. Now that I have justly shamed or warned Christians for their indolence and hopefully exposed the fake ones, let's give some immediate relevance to today's chaos in the country and the world. Most people don't understand the connection between socialism, which is a euphemistic term for communism, and atheism. You've heard me say it before that liberalism, progressivism, socialism, and communism, they all have their root in evil and stems from an evil core. Those who have embraced these isms have either been given over to a depraved mind or demonically influenced or possessed. Yet some will claim to be Christian when they are in fact hell-bound false prophets and teachers that Christ warned about that would occur in the end times. It is infecting our politics because too many Christians have abandoned politics and are clueless as to the wolves in sheep's clothing. There are two that I can think of right now from the political world who are twisting Scripture now, and the first is Governor Beshear of Kentucky, and then James Talerico of Texas. They hope to win over, if not deceive and divide, naive Christians, particularly the ones who know little about their faith. Beshear of Kentucky is a known pathological liar, but has embarked upon a quest to be president, attempting to fool everyone that he is a moderate. Look at his record. He has supported everything that God deplores, and he has a record like Nancy Pelosi. Let me give you a few quick examples out of hundreds that apply to this reprobate. He is going around the country saying that Kentucky has a surplus, but he had nothing to do with it because he was against it and proposed spending that would have put the state in the red. The legislature overrode his vetoes. That is why we have a surplus, not because of Beshear. Beshear is also going around the country claiming that Kentucky has a rainy day fund, trying to claim credit for it, when in fact he vetoed it, and the Republican legislature overrode it. He also takes credit for Kentucky's tax cuts, when in fact he vetoed the bill reducing taxes. Folks, he is a blatant liar and should have been booted out of office, and shame on those Kentuckians who voted for him. Then you have James Talerico in Texas running for the U.S. Senate, and he, like Beshear, twists Scripture. Talerico said that God is binary, and also says there are six genders. I think God needs a new furnace in hell. Both of these men, politicians, are false prophets and false teachers. They are heretical. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. In addition to those two, there are communists running as Democrats across this country, and it is metastasizing. From Seattle to Chicago and New York, the Democrat Party is recruiting more and more communists and falsely labeling them as socialist Democrats. Folks, there is no difference between a socialist or a communist. People are fleeing from these cities who have been taken over by godless socialist authoritarians, or I should say so-called socialist authoritarians. But none of this could have happened if good people had not been asleep and lazy. Here's another devastating example, and that is Governor Spanberger of Virginia, who just signed a law that regardless of what the people of Virginia vote for in a presidential election, if the national vote total goes the opposite way than how the Virginians voted, their votes mean nothing, and Virginia's electoral votes will go in accordance with the national vote. The people of Virginia were fools and were fooled into thinking that Spanberger was a moderate. There is no such thing as a moderate in the Democrat Party anymore. What Spanberger has done, if it spreads, is the destruction of the electoral system and our republic. As I have followed so many politicians in the past, I have followed this wicked, wicked, wicked woman and knew that what she was up to. She is a Jezebel who was one of the most wicked women in the Bible. This new law in Virginia is a design to secure the Democrat communist in power permanently. There is no ad hominem or pejorative too strong or too negative or too far in describing Spanberger as a person or her quest to permanently secure Democrats in power. She has no solutions for current problems. All she cares about is her ideology and how to rule over you and destroy our republic. Now, I know a horrendous and eternal judgment is coming for these people, but I'm trying to avoid the harm and the suffering that will come to so many, and particularly the younger generation who do not deserve the consequences and failures and selfishness of my and other generations for not looking out for our children's future. Let me give you just a quick rundown of some of the influencers or people in authority that are a threat. And I mean in an immediate threat to your life, liberty, and happiness. Of course, we know about Biden and his administration who opened the borders and flooded the country with criminals and terrorists. But of course, there was no consequence for them. You see, we lack accountability and consequence, and thus the disease spreads. This phenomenon has occurred around the world, and Europe has destroyed itself. It just has not been buried yet. Dr. Thomas Sowell recently said Europe is now beginning to see their stupidity and are now trying to reverse course, but it is likely irreparable. England, for example, and its liberal government, along with all the Marxist non-governmental organizations whose powers influence the politicians there, knew about the Pakistani gang rapes of white girls. We're talking about the rape of tens of thousands of white girls. I want you to think about this deeply for a moment. Tens of thousands of white girls in England have been raped by Pakistani gangs, and the liberal whites in government have covered it up. They all should be hung. This deserves a death sentence. Everyone that was complicit should never draw another breath. If you rape or harm a child, you should be eliminated from this world. But they hushed it up and swept it under the carpet, because their goal was to create a fundamental change in the electorate so that they could remain in power forever. There must be consequences for those in this country and in Europe who are responsible for the devastation of the West, and it should contain and include the maximum penalty. 45% of Democrats say they are ashamed of America, and an even larger percentage say that they want to leave. Well, good. I wish they would go and leave. I wish they would. But that tells you just what kind of a party it has become. We have the Republican Party where polling shows that 90% of them love this country, are proud of this country. And the other is now a communist party. They call it the Democratic Party, but it's been taken over by the communists. And even though 85% of this country believes in voter identification, and that goes for Republicans and Independents and Democrats, the leadership in the Democrat Party, being of the communist persuasion that they are, refuses to support voter identification because they believe they are on the cusp of permanent power and takeover. They have never been able to maintain power or win elections without the ability to cheat. And you know that's exactly what that is when they don't want to identify. And other investigations have shown where there's been massive cheating in a lot of the blue states, dead people voting, and they won't even purge their voter rolls, and they won't even submit to subpoenas from the Department of Justice to show what their voter rolls show. The Democrats and their media are always creating new narratives, trying to undermine the security of this country, and most recently with the Iranian conflict. We have Senators Moulton, Murphy, Schumer, and Representatives Jeffries and Pelosi and others have gone so far as to create a new narrative that Iran won the war. Even though Iran's nuclear capabilities have been destroyed, they no longer have an air force or a navy or defensive capabilities. These people are the enemies of this country. That is the Democrats. They are the enemies of this country when they say that in this war that the other side won. They are aiding and abetting our enemies. And they need to be taken to trial. And I'm talking about a trial that includes capital punishment. Appointed judges who are letting illegal aliens and criminals who are guilty of multiple crimes are being let off the hook, only to commit further crimes, if not murders. Folks, we have a terrible infestation of anti-Americans in nearly every walk of life in this country where they are in positions of influence and authority. Sadly, these things you should know, but you don't. Too many of you don't. The enemy is no longer at the gates. They are inside the gates. We are fighting a war without bullets, but it won't stay that way for long. Here's a perfect example of the criminality of the Democrats. In the last 13 months, there have been 0 illegal aliens crossing the border under President Trump. Not so with the Democrats. The Democrats allowed over 10 million people into this country, illegal aliens into this country. This was an attempt to subjugate American citizens. Think about it. The illegal immigrants came from oppressive regimes, so it's no loss to them if this one becomes repressive. Folks, these are treasonous crimes and would be prosecuted if only you would rise up and demand it. In Los Angeles, the Democrats are preparing to allow non-citizens to vote. They're destroying your privilege as a citizen. Here are some numbers for you. There were 735 illegal criminals who were arrested in May alone in Texas by ICE. Folks, the numbers are staggering around the country, yet fake protesters pop up and Democratic officials want to eliminate ICE and reopen the borders, and if they take power in November, they will. This is criminal activity in itself. Those that are funding and particularly these protesters who are being paid, they need to be prosecuted, as well as the Democrat officials who are blocking federal immigration laws. That's the law. It's been said that if you break this law or you impede the enforcement of federal immigration laws, that's a felony and you get sued. Hey, Department of Justice, you need to start making examples of some of these Democrat officials. Many ask me, how are all these things happening? Well, around 15 states now being majority atheist with no Republican representation and the LGBTQ revolution spreading like a cancer, it's because we allow those who support and promote these things are never held accountable, but rather they get reelected. They hide in the shadows. In fact, they may even be in the church pew next to you. It's not going to do them any good. Many of you enable all this by what you purchase, the company that you keep, and your habits of cowardly silence. You have given not only evil the right to free speech, but have given the lie the right to exist without consequence. The lies have no rights, but we act as though the lie has a right to exist. It doesn't. We must start dragging these decision makers out of the shadows and into the open and make them suffer the consequences of their actions. For example, the minor league baseball team, the York Revolution, forfeited a game against, and they elected to do this, forfeit a game against a Maryland team because the decision makers of the York team were going to make the York team wear gay pride jerseys, and they wouldn't do it. Some of the York players refused to wear them, and consequently they had to forfeit the game. These are the very type of people we need, and shame on you if you don't start standing up like these players did. But let's not chop off the top of the weed. Let's dig down and pull it up by the roots. Evil, cowardly, depraved men and women have worked their way into our major businesses who have prostituted themselves to the dollar, and they lack any moral code. This only advances division and helps the communist Democrats who get plenty of funding from these corporate types. Those within the York organization who made the decision to have the players wear gay celebration jerseys should be exposed, drag them out of the shadows and into the light, and drum them out of business. It is that type and kind of thinking that is funding the decline in this country. Just as Russian dictator Nikita Khrushchev once said about capitalism and Americans back in the 1960s, he said, "You will make the rope that we hang you with." And that's the weakness in capitalism. And you can't have amoral people leading big corporations that are funding the Democrats. And indeed, Khrushchev was correct. Capitalism in the hands of amoral leaders becomes suicidal, and it is they who fund and feed the cancer that is devouring us. Don't you dare sit in a pew next to someone who you know is on a daily basis, from the positions they hold, support evil. In fact, drive them out. And this exercise should also be applied within family, friends, associations, where you shop, and what you purchase, and what you invest in. So to my listeners up in Pennsylvania, you should be flooding the switchboards demanding the names of those who made the decision to force their players to support a depraved cause. Start posting their names and their pictures and bring about heavy financial consequences for their decisions. As I've told many of late, the problem with evil propagandists is that it is easily cured by selectively going after high-profile targets and making examples of them. Bring about devastating financial consequences for these people's actions and their conduct. And once the rest see the consequences of such actions, they will hesitate, if not abandon, similar conduct. Let's not forget the lessons of the Bud Light commercial where they used that transy Dylan Mulvaney to promote its beer. It cost the company billions. And they learned their lesson from that, and it was not only very expensive, but it taught a lesson to everybody else and all the other companies. Well, we better not go there or we just might lose billions. The power is in your hands. Let me repeat that. The power lies in your hands, and if you bring about devastating financial consequences, the evil that these people do will retreat, and in some instances out of necessity, because then insurance companies will refuse coverage. And just as in Kentucky, where laws were passed allowing children whose parents allowed hospitals and doctors to do transition surgery on them, once the child reaches majority age, they could turn around and sue for damages. No insurance company is going to write a policy that they know will cost them millions and millions, and no doctor or hospital is going to allow those types of surgeries without insurance coverage. Folks, the solution is so easy, and it starts with you being active. Pick a cause, any cause, and go after it. Start showing the world that evil decisions have consequences. Remember, weeds only grow where they are allowed to grow. It is up to us to fill and till the garden. So get busy. Now, let's jump to another subject, but still connected to that which plagues us as a nation. Thursday on News Nation's Cuomo Democratic strategist James Carville claimed President Trump was too old and tired to finish his second term if he faces adversity after the midterms. This guy, Carville, is Satan's mouthpiece, and I've never heard him tell the truth. This all goes all the way back to the Clinton days. You know, some people look on the outside the evil that resides within him, and these pictures pretty much proves my point. Well, 82-year-old Carville is the perfect example of the pot calling the kettle black. Let me give you an example of Trump's stamina that Carville lies about. Trump stayed up until 2 a.m. for the White House UFC fight, then got on Air Force One to travel to Switzerland for the G7 meeting, where he met with all the leaders around the world in the G7. Then he flew back for another heavy docket of meetings the next day. Carville is among the walking dead. That means those whose destiny is hell. Well, how can you tell someone has that destiny? Well, it's pretty easy, folks. All you have to do is read the Bible. It tells you what will and will not send you to hell. Then, of course, some say, well, I don't believe in hell and I don't believe in all that stuff. And I respond that, well, you can't make something disappear by not believing it. Sorry for your luck. That's reality. Carville is one of those architects that put the Clintons in the office back in the 1990s, which began the liberal, leftist, and communist slide in this country up to today. The most that Carville can do today is sit in his chair and spew invectives and lies. He's been a very evil man if you've followed his life. Truth does not and has not resided in this man for as long as I've known him, and that basically goes back to the Clinton days in the 90s. Now, some have asked me, well, do I have anything good to say about the Democrats? No. And I don't have anything good to say about the devil either. And I'm not going to do it just to appease the woke and the politically correct. Chaos is and has been a useful tool for the Democrat Party. They survived on manufacturing grievance, emotional manipulation as well. They want outrage. They want division. They want Americans to fight each other because chaos is completely useful to them. Words like racism, white supremacy, fascism is their default. So with that, let's take a hard look at what the Democrats have been from the beginning to now. And as I have revealed in previous articles and podcasts, the Democrats were the slave owners, yet they call Republicans racist. Democrats created the Jim Crow laws and voter suppression, but they accuse Republicans of that. The Democrats created the KKK. They still blame Republicans for racism. The Democrats tried to block the civil rights laws in the 1960s and filibustered it for 75 days, but the Republicans pushed it through. But they call the Republicans racist? The Democrats were the ones responsible for segregation. In the 1960s and in the midst of the Cold War, it was the Democrats who wanted to unilaterally, nuclearly disarm this country. Wow, with Russia having more nuclear bombs than we did. The wars we fought in the 1900s were Democrat wars. Most Democrats are atheists. Most Democrats say they would like to leave America. Good, do it. Surveys have revealed that the Democrats are statistically the least charitable. Conservatives and Republicans are over double in what the Democrats donate. Yet they say Republicans are insensitive and greedy. The Democrats give you open borders to the world's criminals, terrorists, and the mentally ill. Yet the Democrats call the Republicans xenophobic. The Democrats want to force transgender on your children. They call Republicans transphobic. The Democrats give you abortion up to birth, and in some instances even after, and they call it health care. 90% of Republicans are patriotic and proud of their country. Only 35% of the Democrats are. And to wrap this up and to show you that not much has changed with Democrats since the Civil War, back then they asked you, who's going to pick our cotton if we didn't have slavery? But today, as you recall Nancy Pelosi saying, if the Democrats don't have the illegal immigrants coming over, who will pick our avocados? Now, who are the elitists there? It's amazing how people are so forgetful as we are so blind to the evil of the Democrats. Now, I use a lot of interchangeable terms, but they're all the same person wrapped up into one. So in case you have forgotten, a liberal, a leftist, a socialist, a communist, a God-hating, hedonistic, American-hating reprobate, they're all peas in the same pod, folks. Well, what's driving them crazy currently is the World Cup. And you say, well, why would that drive them crazy? Well, it's because the hundreds and thousands of interviews that's taking place right now of visitors from around the world who are extolling the virtues of America, they are falling in love with America, and they are astounded by what they're seeing in America, and they are in an utter state of disbelief as to how good we have it. Basically, these foreign visitors are doing videos and sending messages back home as to everything that they've been told about America was wrong. So now you're asking, why would they be upset with the rest of the world being so excited about America? It's because the Democrat left thrives on disunity, resentment, bitterness, and creating a sour attitude in you toward your fellow citizen. And with so many foreign visitors giving comparisons as to what it's like back in their home country compared to what they're seeing in America, it does not fit with the Democrat narrative. The same demonic, deceitful leftist media that lies to us here exists over there. The common thread is a totalitarian worldview, which simply put is corrupt people who have nothing to offer and only finds validation for their life in ruling over others and oppressing others. When all these foreign guests return home, they may very well become the real force to be reckoned with in their countries because nothing that they have seen matches with what they've been told in their country. Nothing motivates or outrages people more than to find out that they've been lied to, and these people are finding out that they've been lied to. They love America. They're astounded surrounded by it. I believe to some extent that is happening in this country with regard to the younger generation, 90% of which do not trust our institutions, agencies, or government, or corporations for that matter. And to some extent, that's a good start. And I remember when I went through high school, I was outraged when I learned the truth that the world was not going to end in an ice age, or that the irreducible complexity of the human body did not randomly come about from a single cell in some swamp, or that the cells growing in a woman's womb was not human, as if it were going to develop into anything else. Once I learned all that stuff, I was outraged and distrusted the institutions. Now, let me make a brief remark with regard to what we hear in the news of late about Iran and the narrative that the demonic media is spinning, that there is uncertainty about the deal with Iran and that the president has no plan and is desperate. For those who want to know more and in greater detail about what the plan is, let me ask you this. If you've ever played chess, and before you make your move, do you ever tell the player on the other side of the board what your next move is and why you're making it? Well, of course not. Only a fool would do that. And the media is filled with those kinds. Remember, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, and the North Koreans all watch and listen to our news. So why would President Trump give away his strategy to some stupid, morally bankrupt news reporter knowing that it's going to be heard by the enemy? So when the president gives a vague answer or doesn't give one at all with regard to what the strategy is with Iran in the peace negotiations, the corrupt media get mad and tell the people that he's confused and that he doesn't have a plan. Well, this is what I call aiding and abetting the enemy. Oh, how many of us make it so hard in our stupidity to keep freedom alive because we always seem to so easily play into the hands of our enemies. Okay, well now here's some quick drive-by news headlines and remarks, and while they deal with different topics, you will note that there is a common thread dealing with the unspoken civil war that we are in between the radical left and communist Democrats who want to control every aspect of your life, and normal Americans who just want to live their lives in peace and as they see fit. First of all, let's start off with Tucker Carlson, who says he's breaking from the GOP and says that there's no chance he would support the Republican Party. Well, good riddance, Tucker. You have every evidence of having a psychotic break. You gained your fame with Fox News, went around preaching conservative values and virtue, and now you have taken a wild, disconnected, and psychotic break with reality. You have become rich off of saying nothing, and when you actually analyze what you're saying, it's so circular. You've become just a headline whore just to get a bunch of clicks. You have no plans for how to make the world better, and even much less your country. You are now justly targeted as a buffoon, as some of the most hilarious memes that I've seen points out your idiocracies, speaking volumes with regard to the true empty suit you are. Well, now this next item should be of no surprise to you. A judge blocks a subpoena of the Trump administration against Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and the Democrats related to the Medicare fraud that is now reaching over $9 billion in Minnesota. Yes, that's your money, and you wonder why you can't afford anything? It's because you voted Democrat, and you voted for these frauds. Anytime someone complains to me as to the high prices and unaffordability of houses, my first question to them is, well, who did you vote for? And if they say Democrat, and even in rare instances when it is a Republican, I say, well, you got what you voted for. Okay, now moving on to the next one. So now that the Democrat communists have a foothold in this country, which is our big cities, and like Mayor Zoran Mondani, kind of sounds like a sci-fi character, doesn't he? He's the titular head of that communist revolution that is now spreading across the country, and he's chasing money out of New York City by the truckloads. Billions are leaving and jobs are being lost in the thousands. He's spreading his poisons to other cities, and as we have seen in Seattle, where the mayor communist witch is now begging Amazon not to leave and keep the 30,000 jobs there that are at stake. Well, Decisions have consequences, and if among those 30,000 they voted for the communist mayor there, then good. Starve as far as I'm concerned. You earned it. You got what you voted for. Communist candidates are running in other major cities as well around the country, who have all become more emboldened in spreading communist propaganda. I've been telling people for decades that this was going to happen. This is a perfect reason why I believe that not everyone should have the right to vote. The liberals and the Jews in New York City voted overwhelmingly for this communist mayor Mondami. And as money flees from New York City and jobs are being lost, taxes are going up, and these moronic imbeciles have the temerity and the nerve to complain about affordability? Seriously? Here's the irony of it all. They will vote for the Democrat communist again, because they bought into the little slogan created by the Democrats called affordability. You know, that was going to be their ticket to winning the midterms, when most of these idiots created the mess in the first place, and that is the mess of the affordability problem. They deserved it. And get this, and this is really, really rich. They hate Trump, but it's because of Trump that their taxes didn't go up $3,000. In fact, they got a big tax break under Trump. Now, here's an important one for you. Why is this November's election so important? The Democrats already have a plan to eliminate the Electoral College, putting the populated cities in total control of your life. We just saw the start of it with the Virginia Governor Spanberger, a radical leftist woman for whom the dictionary does not have enough pejorative terms to describe. But she signed into law, with the help of the Democrats in the state, mostly government workers who live in Northern Virginia, that on presidential elections, that Virginia's electoral votes will go to the candidate that gets the most votes nationally. As I previously said, what that means is that even though Virginia voters may vote Republican, she can deny the will of the people in her state and support the Democrat nominee for president. How many more ways can I tell you how wicked and evil those are within the Democrat Party, in which the communist cancer has metastasized and taken over the entire party? Okay, now if you thought the Spanberger thing was bad, here's another one for you. New and even more shocking revelations have come out about the Communist Democrat Senate candidate in Maine. Just when you thought it could not get worse, it has. This guy is beyond being white trash. I can't even repeat the latest things he has said, nor can I write them out with redactions. They are so bad. Truly, folks, with an electorate like that in Maine and the Northeast, people who vote for the likes of this guy need not be part of our national union. Our republic may have squeaked out 250 years, but it can't go on much longer like this. We have nothing in common with these blue atheist states. Now, here's a news flash this morning. This is Wednesday following the Tuesday primaries in New York. Communist Mayor Mondami of New York City and his backed Democrat communist candidates swept key primary races in New York Tuesday, accelerating their rise within the Democrat Party, while more traditional center-left candidates and moderates backed by corporate interests prevailed in other contests. Folks, Civil War 2.0 is getting hot. The fools on the Supreme Court should have outlawed communism decades ago, and they must overrule the birthright citizenship issue that's currently pending before them. These prima donnas are suicidal and live in a bubble. They are the Marie Antoinettes of America. The only problem is not only will they lose their heads, but so many of us will too. I don't care whether you feel like it or not. You got to get up off of your lazy butts, purge yourselves of any association with those who vote for evil, and get to work and start saving what's left of your country. Now, here's another headline for you. A Biden-appointed judge blocks Trump's new verification system to remove foreign nationals from our voter rolls. Folks, you cannot even trust the judiciary in this country anymore, as it has become corrupted with politics, and the law is the last thing on their mind. They have become tyrannical in and of themselves. For example, just this year in Kentucky, the Supreme Court in Kentucky, which is majority Democrat, ruled that they are not impeachable. Imagine that. Even though the Kentucky Constitution reads that the legislature's powers of impeachment are inviolable. Yes, the Kentucky Supreme Court for right now has declared that they or any other judge cannot be impeached unless it goes through a commission and a process totally controlled by other Democrats and the courts. It's the fox guarding the hen house, totally corrupt. And this is in the red state of Kentucky, but it is happening on a larger scale across the country. Liberal judge rulings are being overturned on appeal by the truckloads, but it's only a matter of time before the scales tip as they have in England. Once again, this points out the flaw in our United States Supreme Court that should have addressed what federal district courts have been doing, and the Supreme Court should have dealt with this long ago. Of course, weak Republicans in Congress, particularly like Senator John Thune in the Senate, don't help matters. But right now, they're all that we have. So what's the solution? Well, political parties have come and gone in the past in this country, and now it's time to bury the Democrat Party, or they will bury you. Well, before we close today, here's a bit of good news. Kenny Chesney stated that it's not his place to use the stage to tell people how to think or how to vote. Well, good for him, and that's what we should be demanding of all of our entertainers, and it has nothing to do with free speech, folks, because when you put a dollar value on the things that they promote from a captive audience, that is or should be a violation of federal campaign finance laws, which, if any of the rest of us violated in the same way, we would go to jail. Okay, folks, well, that will do for today. Viewership has really skyrocketed, so thank you very much. I'm sorry I don't have time to respond to every comment, so I'll leave that platform open to all the rest of you to debate amongst yourselves and express your opinions with each other. So until next time, I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.